so much telly. Let's make the most of the 1 hour that we have together. We have a country that, let's be honest, has got some pretty average politicians in it. Be it the Prime Minister or hapless ministers or the silly Teals or the Greens, you know. There's just not that sense of, geez, we're playing with the first rung here. It feels like we're playing with the staffers of reserve grade, so they're not really up to speed. We know that. But there are politicians in and amongst that group who deserve to be singled out for how laser-focused they are on the common values of everyday Australians. And I believe there is no better person in the parliament than Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price. She showed herself to be so fearless last year when every establishment figure, establishment media, establishment business, polite society had its view about whether Australia should or shouldn't put something into the Constitution. She disagreed, and she took the opposition from being a group of people too scared to say no to a group that profoundly said no, and her leadership in particular was why, in part, the country was able to be convinced 60-40 no. But that's old news. What I love about Jacinta, and I loved before she came into the Senate, when we talked to her for years before all of that, and of course she was doing her best on the council in Alice Springs, is that she will just find a way to explain complicated things in a fashion, again, that share the common values of decent and suburban Australia. She's given blistering speeches. She's an incredible interview every time we get the chance to have her on the telly. But she is somebody who is an absolute star of the opposition. She's a person who I hope at some point they find a way to get her into the lower house and she gets to go up the batting order and there is no limit to how high she could achieve. And I think Australians would support her on that journey whenever she chooses to take it. And like many people, I keep an eye on her Facebook page and her social media, and she puts out a newsletter to her supporters quite frequently. And she wrote in the past couple of days an extraordinary open letter about the way Australia is failing at the moment and the way this government in particular is failing. She didn't do an interview, she didn't do radio, so I'm just going to read directly from this. Does this not sound like exactly what we talk about each and every night and what you feel and have felt for years? Quote, the Australian people exercised their democratic rights and put Anthony Albanese in the lodge under the impression that he'd deliver a 275 reduction in power bills, lower the cost of living and leave families better off. But the results are clear. None of that has happened. Interest rates are even higher, inflation has barely slowed, and there is no sign of that $275 reduction. Under Labor, the typical family with a mortgage is now $35,000 a year worse off. What an astonishing failure. She goes on. But it gets worse. Because now the government is bringing in 1.67 million migrants over the next 5 years, right in the middle of a housing crisis. This is nation-destroying stuff. Now, this was written up today, in part by the Daily Mail, so their paragraph says that Senator Price finished the letter labelling Mr Albanese a creature of politics with misplaced priorities and no accountability. Back to Senator Price. Quote, Anthony Albanese is obsessed with his legacy and his photo ops. He's a creature of politics who is already turning his focus to the election rather than focusing on the problems you're facing. That's been the pattern of the last 2 years. Misplaced priorities, no accountability, and all politics all the time. She is 100% correct. She has a spectacular ability to speak like we speak and to reach out beyond the people who would normally seek out programs like this and have the conversations that you have at home each and every day. She's a real credit to herself, her family and the opposition. And again, I read you this because I want you to sign up to her newsletter at her website. I want you to follow her on social media. I want you to be right at the front lines of everything she does, every speech she makes in the parliament and every gesture that she makes in pursuit of a government that we know is all about lies and spin and gaslighting. She has a bright political future in front of her. And again, the sky is the limit. Now, another person who I believe is a fearless politician is Hollie Hughes. Hollie Hughes is a person who has fought very hard to make her way into Parliament. She was incredibly patient, incredibly loyal to her party. And guess what her party turned around and did to her on the weekend? Bang. They've put her in a position that is essentially the unwinnable spot due to all of the factional garbage inside the New South Wales Liberal Party. Now, Hollie is, again, one of those people who just knows how to take up the fight. Just one of those people who is willing to engage with you, to fearlessly stand in the Senate and take them all on. Yet the Liberal Party and its factional rubbish means that a person you've never heard of ends up in a position of greater prominence, and a politician who barely is seen in places like this because it's all a little bit too dirty ends up with the top spot of the Liberal Party in New South Wales. Now, you know that I am absolutely supportive of holding this government to account, and yes, that would mean support for Peter Dutton. But I've got to say, I cannot offer the same support for some of the garbage that is going on in the Senate. Some of the people that exist in the Senate in supposedly the name of the Liberal Party. The people who assume that you will just vote for them because what other options are there? Well, in 2016, people saw other options in the Senate. Well, the largest crossbenchers were elected as a result. In 2019, those people came back and they voted for Team Blue and they won. When disappointment set in, people, of course, in the upper house vote, they went in lots of other places and the preferences never came back. Now, Hollie has every right to pack up her bag and not say anything again publicly, but more importantly, I know she won't. I know that she'll sit back, be understandably mighty peed off at the people around her, but she will continue the fight all the way to the next election. She is always welcome here. There are good people in our parliament. The people who sometimes wield the power inside the party, not so good. Now, right now, Senate is in estimates, which means the politicians get to play sort of prosecutor from time to time, and there are people that, again, are very good at it and some that are pretty bad at it. But it's an opportunity to try to get some answers out of politicians who would otherwise not have to answer a question in the parliament. Remember, they really don't. And, of course, at a press conference where they just change the subject. So Senate estimates is that process which is taking place as we speak. Now, often the politician is sitting next to a bureaucrat. The bureaucrat is, of course, supposedly subservient to the minister, but the reality is that the minister in a Labor government is just basically an extension of the public service. So they're all on the same team about not embarrassing anything to do with a Labor government. So you get stuff like this.
Take on notice.
I'll take it on notice. I'll take it on notice.
So take it on notice.
I'll take it on notice.
You're taking it on notice.
I'll have some more questions on notice for that.
And it is something that all politicians of both sides have done for some period of time. But I'll take it on notice basically means I'll get back to you. And I'll get back to you in written form because I can't answer or won't answer the question in front of you right now. Well, a tabled document in the Senate has blown a massive hole in how this government hides accountability, how ministers and the public servants backing them up don't answer the questions. This is that document, tabled in the Senate and done so a couple of weeks ago. It is, in part, advice which is coming directly from the highest office in the land about how to answer, or more importantly, not answer questions. In fact, suggested draft response, suggested draft response, suggested draft response. Lots of basically the script. And when, in this case, the shadow ministers or the Liberal senators start answering or asking tough questions, well, you just consult the script and don't answer the question. Now, interestingly, this has actually been seen by the clerk of the Senate or the clerk of the Senate as not the way it's supposed to work. Now, of course, there'll be no sanctions because whatever, they're in charge of the rules. They'll be able to overrule whatever the opinion of the clerk seems to be. But we literally have a script that is now being sent out. Now, maybe this has happened for every government, but they've all been able to hide the script. This script is now available for all to see. And the senators, like the ones that I just showed you, are now the ones asking the questions, but because they have the script, they're able to say, is that your answer or are you just reading from the script? Perfect example of it was Matt Canavan asking questions today, where, again, big, vague answers were being given because that's what the script says rather than answer the damn question.
Answer is a direct quote from page 7 of the PMO manual. And I'll just read it out. It is a little lengthy, I apologise, but it shows the complete lack of answers here.
Now, again, I won't bore you with the super details of this, but it's about showing you the tactic, showing you how the sausage is made. And just like they always say, you don't want to see how the sausage is made. This is the example of the person being asked the question who's following the script, who just repeats the script until they change the question.
I mean, Minister, do you consider that an answer to that question?
Well, it was definitely an answer to the question.
In what way?
How?
You've just provided, the answer provides a description of IDCs, which was not asked for. We know what an IDC is. How is that an answer to, and it's a very simple question, how many IDCs are you a member of?
Well, an answer was provided, and obviously from your point of view, it's not as satisfactory as it could be.
Are we speaking the same language here?
You see, the game here is not just to rob the opposition of information. It's also, because it's in front of cameras, a desperate attempt to not get caught in something that might become a story by tomorrow morning or the 6 p.m. news in a couple of days' time. But this is the government that was supposedly about transparency. This was the government that was always going to be accountable. This was the one that wasn't going to play these types of games. But of course they are, just like every other politician that has gone before them, interested in putting out fires or hiding fires than telling you the truth of what's going on. A perfect example of that, and let's see how this goes over the next few days, is there is the federal budget that the media spends an awful lot of time looking at and literally gets locked behind closed doors to read. And it's about $1 billion here and $1 billion there and tax cuts, and you get all that. But that's not the full financial picture of how much the Australian government is spending. There are literally billions and billions and billions of dollars, I would suggest hundreds of billions of dollars, that are off budget. And yes, every government has done it, but still, this one that promised to be different is doing exactly the same thing. You see, you know how Chris Bowen has got a slush fund, basically, $60 billion of which to enter into commercial agreements that then we don't know about, with people to help supercharge the building of the renewable energy network. Well, none of that is in the federal budget. That is off budget. And with Australia having a very slender, at this stage, surplus built exclusively off things like petrol tax, cigarette tax and alcohol tax, the reality is that once you start to actually look at the money that is off budget, it pushes us deeper into deficit, which means it's borrowed money. Let's find out in this Senate estimate. So my challenge to everyone asking questions is to ask the department how much of their spending is off budget, and can we please have a list of it? Because won't it be fascinating to see if the transparent government that's got a script about how you don't answer the questions will also find a way to not tell you how much money they are spending off the budget that requires us to borrow from overseas, which in part is how our debt under this government gets to $1.2 T4 trillion. And that's just for the stuff that's on budget. Off budget, I think, is going to make our toes curl. Anyway, challenge to everyone asking the questions.